What's up? Welcome back to the Barton and Bud Show. Excited to get back in here because, Bud, we've got some actual news to talk about. I know that this isn't maybe the college football news that everyone's hoping to hear around this time of year, but at the very least, we've got some big monster recruiting news. But first, before I throw it to you, Bud, and get us going on the latest, make sure you are subscribing. You are rating us 5 stars, nothing less, and giving us a comment and a review because that's huge. That helps us a bunch. We're a young podcast. We're trying to get going. Tell a friend. But Bud, hopefully the news on the recruiting trail is going to give everybody a little bit of juice, a little bit of excitement this time of year.
I mean, this is like manna from the heavens, dude. We got a decommit from a top 5 player in the nation. Corey Foreman, at multiple sources reporting to Greg Biggins, our West Coast insider, that Corey Foreman has decommitted from Clemson. And there's just so many angles we can take on this. I think first and foremost, let's talk about the team he was committed to. And this is a 5-star defensive end prospect from Cali, and Clemson's been recruiting nationally recently. We don't see decommitments from Clemson, basically ever.
It is totally unprecedented the way Clemson goes about their recruiting process and the way they are able to protect and guard against decommitments. Decommitments are a standard fact of life in major college football recruiting. It's maybe not if you're an FCS program or if you're a lower level group of 5 that's just sort of collecting the players as you can. If you're recruiting 5 stars, if you're recruiting at the highest level of college football, it's just baked in. You're just going to have to do some of these battles. You're going to have to jump through some hoops. Clemson, because of a very strict, ideological in some ways approach to recruiting by Dabo Swinney, has, and you mentioned their first decommitment since 20, I think you said 16, maybe with Cordarian Richardson.
Yep.
I think I saw in Greg Biggins' article a couple days ago, because he did the legwork on this. I knew it had been a while, but I think it was 2014 since Clemson had a non-academic related decommitment, which is just unreal. And it's driven by Dabo Swinney being very making sure guys don't commit before they're ready. There's no such thing as pressuring guys into committing at Clemson. And then, as you alluded to, Bud, it's a very strict policy, which really no one else has the clout to enforce other than Clemson in some ways. But there's a very strict policy that Clemson puts in place saying, look, when you commit, you are committed only to Clemson. You cannot take official visits. You cannot take unofficial visits. Your recruitment is done. And if a kid's not ready to make a commitment, given that policy, then they just back off it. And then they just, and Clemson gives them the space to not make that commitment. Well, this is a kid that agreed to that and wants to take visits, and he's the number 2 player in the country. Is he number 1? Number 1 player in the country in the composite rankings. And Corey Foreman looks like he's back on the market.
Yeah, he's back on the market, like you said, with Clemson's no visit policy, official or unofficial. And Clemson is so strict about this. Like they ask the parents, they ask the kid, they ask the coach, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Oftentimes they want the kid to kind of go back home and sit on it, right, and make sure it's still the right decision before he goes public with it, if he happens to commit when he's on campus for a visit for them. 2014, dude, since the last non-academic related decommitment is crazy. And we have seen other schools try to do this, right? Paul Johnson famously tried to do this for a while at Georgia Tech. And I was on the Nolecast last weekend, and we were talking about this with the possibility of Foreman. And remember Trey Jackson, who ended up being with the Patriots? He was a starter for a couple of years at guard for FSU there. He was committed to Georgia Tech for a while. He's like, hey, I'm going to take a visit to Florida State and Bama. And the way I recall it, this is probably a decade ago, they pulled it and they lost a 3-year starter all-ACC caliber kid at guard from Georgia Tech. So you can do this if you have a whole lot of leverage. And I think the schools that could pull this off are probably Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, and that's probably it among the really big boy recruiters. And that's a pretty good segue here to some of the schools we need to talk about who may be in the market now for Corey Foreman.
But I'd even throw in this. Yes, like those schools probably could enforce this, but I don't think those schools would even want to enforce it because if you think about it, like Alabama, in a lot of ways, goes places Clemson doesn't want to go in terms of playing the game with high maintenance 5-star guys. You know, Georgia, Ohio State. Like Ohio State, maybe a little bit less so. Ohio State is skews a little bit towards the Clemson side of things, and I think that you see a little less turnover as a result with Ohio State's class. But Bama's just out there trying, like, we're the freaks. Let's just find the freaks. If we got to, deal with a little bit of decommitment flipping on us, like we'll live with it. We're trying to get the most talented roster possible. Whereas Clemson is going to sacrifice on the other end. They're going to sacrifice maybe not getting quite as many freaks as they otherwise could because they want to make sure everyone is a locker room fit. And obviously it's worked for both programs that are recruiting at that level. But I think that's a really important sort of nuance to the Clemson mentality. In terms of what this means moving forward for Corey Foreman, because remember too, Corey Foreman, for those that aren't familiar with him, he is a 5-star, number 1 player in the country, defensive end out of California, Southern California, coming across the country to go to Clemson, a program that traditionally has been recruiting really just in the Southeast. Just the last couple of years have really been branching out, extending that footprint out to the West Coast. DJ Uiagalelei is the quarterback that committed last year. He's the 5-star monster, huge arm dude, and that broke the seal a little bit out west. Corey Foreman jumping on board again right behind him was sort of this eye-opening moment in Clemson's national recruiting approach. And so, again, we all assumed, all right, Corey Foreman's then going to sign with Clemson. Wow, what a monster get. But I think now, I mean, this shows a little bit of the danger of that approach. I think that's point A. I think point B is this perhaps is reflective a little bit of this entire national environment that we're in, where I think you'll see a lot of kids maybe be a little bit more tempted to sticking close to home given the uncertainty of just sort of like our current circumstances. And then the third point is that a school that is looking like maybe in good shape for Corey Foreman and that he does want to visit is USC. And I don't know about you, Bud, but it kind of just feels like USC's gotten a lot of commits recently. It kind of feels like there's a little bit of just optimism around USC's program right now that was lacking, I'd say even like 2 months ago. And I don't know where that comes from other than just maybe generally looking at the roster for next year, generally looking at the recruiting, and generally thinking about the idea that, look, USC is still USC. Kids in California are still going to be drawn to USC. USC's always going to bounce back, and the temptation's always going to be there. And don't count USC out just because they had a slow recruiting cycle last year. I mean, they kind of look like they've got a little bit of life back in them.
So many great points. I totally agree with you. Bama kind of recruits the eastern part of Florida, and Clemson more hangs out on the west coast of Florida, and those are very different areas there, if you will, as far as it comes to coming to play the game. With Clemson, how many just regular long-distance relationships do you think are being ended right now by the virus, right? Like you may be willing to break quarantine to go drive somewhere to maintain a relationship, but you're not hopping on a flight cross country. And I think if you asked Clemson and you gave them the Barton and Bud truth serum, they would have probably told you they were worried about a California kid who wouldn't be able to get to see them for months on end, out of sight, out of mind a little bit. And I think you're right that this whole lockdown is probably going to help teams. And you wrote about this, by the way, teams who have a lot of talent in their backyard, because it's a little bit closer, a little more close to home, and a little more comfort. But also, when we do start back up with visits, and this is not a Corey Foreman specific thing, but when we do start back up with visits, the schools that are going to be in best position to get multiple visits within that sort of compressed time frame are going to be the schools that you don't have to take multiple flights to go see, right? Because you're going to be able to drive there a couple times to make sure you're really comfortable there. I think Clemson is kind of suffering here a little bit from the out of sight, out of mind thing. And with USC, we just had Clay Helton on our 24/7 Sports social distance chat, and He's super optimistic, man, about this year. They think they've got a squad. He thinks in Graham Harrell's second year as the offensive coordinator there, along with Slovis and all the receiver talent they have coming back, that thing's really going to hum. And he was pretty excited about that. The defense could be better over there. They got to start with Alabama. But, yeah, they kind of took last year off in recruiting. Not officially, but what they signed, 13 kids maybe, and it was the worst-rated USC class, I think, in either of our lifetimes,
ever.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In the modern recruiting era.
And now they're back, it seems.
It seems that they are pacing that way. So recently they've landed Anthony Beavers, they've landed Kalen Bullock, they've landed Samarian Gordon, Maximus Gibbs, a huge 360-pound offensive lineman. Guys, I mean, those aren't necessary. I mean, those are all good players, but not necessarily the monster home run ripples across the college football universe play. But this guy would be, and I think that would, in some ways, to me, like you can really get a sense for where momentum lies in college football programs by the tenor of recruiting, and this is the type of sort of indicator, like if you're looking for stock tips, like if Corey Foreman commits to USC, like to me, that speaks not just to, hey, they're going to have a good player in the future, but it speaks to a confidence in what USC is starting to build again. That just might be a little bit of Kindle for you to sort of latch onto if you're kind of trying to look for some long-term value out there. So. Big news on the recruiting trail. You got anything else on Corey Foreman, Bud, or is it time to move to NFL draft?
I think the ink is almost dry on this conversation, but speaking of ink, we really should discuss pretty quickly. When is it appropriate to get a like a large tattoo of the school to which you're committed? I mean, because now Corey Foreman's out there and he's got a pretty good sized Clemson tat on him. Do you go to get laser on that, or do you think, hey, maybe I might recommit to Clemson? So, what are your thoughts on the recruits getting the tattoos for their schools this early in the process?
Listen, I've never had the courage to put something permanently on my body, and I've never found something I had enough conviction with to feel like I needed to permanently put it on my body. Now that I have no biceps to show off, like I'm definitely not going to get one. But I say, if you're into just getting stuff put on your body just randomly, hey, that's a time in your life when you committed to Clemson and you ended up at USC. Hey, you look back on that with pride, buddy, because you were the most highly recruited player in the country. And it's worked out okay for Reuben Foster, the former Auburn commits with a big old Auburn tattoo on his arm that ended up at Alabama as a first-round draft pick.
You know what I really want to see, and especially now because we're all so bored, I want to see a kid do an old school, like Bleacher Report style flip video, not a commit video, but a flip video where he basically goes in, they show the before tattoo, and then they show like the tattoo makeover where the guy has tatted over it, and somehow he turns, like a Texas logo into an A&M logo or something like that. And then the reveal is the new tat. Like that would be really badass.
I'm with it. That would be great. Yeah. That's taking us up a notch. And maybe this is the guy to do it. Corey Foreman, get it done, man. You're hearing it from Barton and Bud. The tattoo logo is going to reveal your commitment.
Could you do the USC with the tiger head? I don't know. We'll have to dig deeper into that. Before we get to the draft, we have a little bit of old business talked about. Last week, got a couple questions about a stat that I referenced that I didn't actually give, and that was Jalen Hurts passing in playoff games before garbage time. And Barton and I had a discussion, and I think we both agree that Hurts has some chance to be successful in the NFL. I think Barton likes his odds a little better than I do, but he's probably not ready to be a day one guy. We would agree on. But the stat, and Barton's not heard this yet. So in playoff games, non-garbage time, so we're going to use the Bill Connolly definition of garbage time, which I think is like if you're down 28 in the third quarter, obviously defenses are going to play a little bit differently against you. So 95 attempts in 5 playoff games, 44 completions. So we're looking at a 46.3% completion percentage in those games before garbage time, and a 4.5 yards per attempt. So the defenses they faced were the Washington defense, the 2016 Clemson defense in that game in which Clemson won, the Clemson defense that was pretty damn good, actually. They had an offense that couldn't score under Kelly Bryant. Georgia in the national title game before he got yanked, and then last year, LSU. So, again, 44 of 95 for 4.5 yards per attempt, which I went and looked up. That is a lot under what those defenses allowed against other FBS teams even. So it's like, yes, those are great defenses, and they snuff everybody out. But in this set, it was pretty far under what those defenses averaged allowing anyway.
Yeah, so I think so when you initially framed it, I was under the impression we were talking about him as basically at Oklahoma.
Gotcha. Okay.
And granted, look, at Oklahoma, because I'm just looking up his numbers now, against LSU wasn't a good day. 48% passing, 217 yards. He did have 7 yards per attempt, so a little better than the number you threw out.
And before garbage time for him, if you want it, against LSU, 5 of 18 for 101.
All right. So, and I don't know what is that? I don't know what that is. Yards per attempt.
3.
Okay.
5.2, 5.3.
All right. So that's more in line with what you were saying. But like, if we're talking also, Washington, if you're throwing Washington and Clemson in 2016 in there, and if we're throwing, he didn't play a lot against Georgia, I guess. So Clemson, he had a decent game. Georgia, he played a half, didn't have a good half in 2017. But like, that was still very much part of the evolution of Jalen Hurts as a passer. Like, that was, I was sitting there in those years talking about and believing that Jalen Hurts was just not there as a passer. And he still may not be there, but I think there's been some evolution in that regard that has me feeling a little bit more confident in him now. Again, so then basically we're getting down to just, he had a bad game against LSU. Is that part of the trend that you're referencing, or is it just a bad game against LSU in a new Jalen Hurts and a new offense? I don't know. Maybe it is part of the trend, but I still get back to the idea that at some level, and I don't think he's a first-round pick, so let me be clear about that. But I still feel like there is, depending on where he drops to, I think there's some value there that you can feel confident in Jalen Hurts, because you're going to get a hard-working version of Jalen Hurts. You're going to get a hard-working version of a college quarterback. You're going to get a versatile version of a college quarterback. So, and I don't know that you argued any of that stuff, but those are interesting numbers for sure. And it definitely makes you think and sort of forces you to really stand on your conviction if you do end up taking him.
For sure. I would love for Jalen Hurts to be my backup quarterback, right? I think using him as a change-up in games early in his career, he's a guy who, like, Alabama loved him, Oklahoma loved him. I mean, just straight out, like, they like that guy. He was not a problem at all for them. He works hard. I'd like him to run my scout team and be my change-up quarterback early in his career, and maybe he can progress to be an NFL passer. Maybe he already is. Like, maybe he's improved enough at Oklahoma to be it earlier than I think. I mean, the draft is certainly not a guarantee at all, as we're about to see here in a little upcoming game we want to play.
You want to get into it?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do this. So this is something I threw out on Twitter on Monday night. What's today? Tuesday, I think? Yeah, the days kind of run together now without really having weekends. So on Monday night, I threw it out and I was like, all right, how many players are you like really confident are going to go in the first round? And if you miss one, you lose the game, right? So people had a lot of just crazy responses out there to it. And a lot of people think that they can pick, 28 guys and get 28 out of the 32 picks. And I don't know. I'm not as confident. So I asked Barton, I said, let's each make a list and we won't show it to each other before the show, and we'll send it to our producer Tani, and he'll show us who we both had on the list of our first round locks. Like, these are guys we are confident are going to go in the first round. And so we'll kind of just go down them one by one. If we have any little comments, hey, maybe this guy scares me a little bit, or like a no doubter. And then we're going to actually take and break down who we had on each other's lists and who we did not have. So clearly the way to win this game, you can't miss any, right? So that's the first part. If you miss any, you're out. But if we both get them all right, the guy who has more locks on his list will win because he got more right without missing any. So I think that makes pretty good sense. Hopefully I explained that the right way. So you got to be perfect. And obviously if you're both perfect, the guy who was perfect more times wins. So you want to read down the list that we had, or the guys who we had on both of our lists that we're sure are going to be first rounders?
Yeah. All right. So let me pull up the Barton and Bud Slack room here. All right. Top of the list. This is alphabetical. It looks like Mekhi Becton. Both of us agree with that. I think it's a little bit hard to imagine any of the top 4 offensive linemen not get drafted. So that's Mekhi Becton. It's Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, and Andrew Thomas. Now, I will say, Andrew Thomas, I balked a little bit on, only because to me he is 4. I could see teams having him 1, but I don't really see a scenario where the other 3 don't get drafted. I could see in the first round again. I could see scenarios where, say, someone has Ezra Cleveland over Andrew Thomas, or Josh Jones over Andrew Thomas, or one of these other guys over Andrew. Even Isaiah Wilson is just, look, this is who we want, the monstrous right tackle, because there's just not that many bodies like this guy. Like, I could just see some weird things happen there where Andrew Thomas just is a little bit the odd man out based on preference. So he was at one point in a little bit of like my second tier pile, but ultimately I was not. Ultimately, it's like a little bit hard for me to envision a guy who's been a 3-year starter at tackle in the best conference in college football, who's been pretty dominant that whole time, doesn't get drafted in the first round. Did you have any hesitation on any of those 4?
No. I Googled the Becton drug test report stuff from the combine that came out in the week, and like just looked at a couple of mock drafts, and I don't see anybody dropping him out of their mock drafts, right? Like he's kind of out of the conversation for the top tackle taken right now, probably. And the dude who nailed the Giants taking Daniel Jones way in advance to anybody else, actually again this year has called his shot with Jedrick Wills to the Giants at whatever pick the Giants have. And so there's a good chance that Wills is the first tackle off the board now, which I think is interesting in and of itself. But no, those 4 tackles I think I think they're pretty much locks, man. Like, yeah, somebody could have Ezra Cleveland over Thomas, but then somebody could also trade up into the first round to get Thomas if they disagree with a Josh Jones or Cleveland going higher. And I think we're going to have 6 or 7 offensive linemen in the first round between the 4 that we think, and then some combination of Ezra Cleveland, Josh Jones, Cesar Ruiz, and maybe
Austin
even
Jackson.
Isaiah Wilson. Excuse me, Austin Jackson.
Jackson.
Right. Yeah. So that's 9 I just listed. I think we'll have at least 6, maybe 7.
Yeah. Derek Brown, I think, I assume no hesitation there.
No, none. I mean, maybe number 3 to the Lions, even if they don't want to take Kuda.
Certainly no hesitation with Joe Burrow. CJ Henderson, we both agree on that. That's a no-brainer to me. I mean, there's getting to be like a pretty steady buzz there is consideration by some teams that he's the best corner in the draft, which to me is, that kind of locks him into the first round to me, especially considering there seems to be several teams that could use a cornerback in this draft.
I follow way too many Falcons fans on Twitter, just I think because of the region in which we live, and They're kind of annoyed now that they might not get to take C.J. Henderson because they're worried about Jacksonville kind of sniping him at 9. And if that happens, then yeah, to me he's a lock. There's no way he gets past Atlanta. I don't think.
Justin Herbert, any small inkling that wanted to leave him off?
No, because quarterbacks get overdrafted because if you don't have one, you don't have a ticket to the dance, and teams are willing to roll the dice, especially with the new CBA, because you don't have one of these who am I thinking about? Sam Bradford type contracts where it torpedoes you until he comes off the books. I mean, you take Herbert mid round 1 and he doesn't work out, no big deal. You're back drafting a QB next year. It doesn't kill your salary cap anymore. So to me, no, man, no hesitation there. Somebody's going to fall in love with those tools.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear to me that the NFL views Herbert as a first round guy. Enough teams do to where he's not going to get past the first round. Jerry Jeudy, I assume no hesitation there.
Nope, none.
Javon Kinlaw, any hesitation there?
A little bit, but I just look at the defensive tackle board this year, and I don't think this is a great year for defensive tackles. Right?
Yeah.
Like after Brown, he's going to get pushed up because I think team need is going to push him up a little bit.
Yeah, I think Kinlaw might be on the Cover 3 podcast. My guy Tom Fernelli made a bold statement that Kinlaw will be the better pro than Derek Brown, and I don't hate that. I think Kinlaw might be the best defensive tackle in this draft, and I would suspect that he is going to go higher than we. It's more likely he goes higher than people suspect than he goes lower than people suspect. I think Kinlaw is pretty much a lock. CeeDee Lamb locked. Jeff Okudah locked. Henry Ruggs locked. I guess, right? I
don't think you run that low and slip out. Like somebody is going to think you're Tyreek Hill with more toughness and take you.
Yeah.
Now, if he slips to like 14 or 15, that wouldn't shock me, I guess. But no, I think that's a lock.
Isaiah Simmons lock. Tua. Do you even think about leaving him off the list?
There's no way. Like if Herbert goes round 1 and Tua does not, I mean, like I'm just going to quit the NFL forever.
Well, if Tua does not, then it would obviously be strictly off of
medical,
of health, medical. And so if the medical was that bad across the league, then we would have been getting blatant lies from his doctor, basically. Because everything we're hearing from the Tua camp is that he's great. Like he is better than before. And look, I know there's going to be that positive spin, but if we're going from that extreme to he's not a first round draft pick because of medical, then there's been some serious misdirection by somebody. So no, I'm with you. Like that would be shocking if you would drop that low. We talked to Andrew Thomas, we talked to Jedrick Wills, talked Tristan Wirfs, and Chase Young. And that's the last guy. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Was that 16?
I think so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 6. So we have 16 in common
that we both feel confident in. You have one additional guy that you were willing to throw on the fire. I had 3.
And you talked me into my guy. In the last podcast, you were actually higher on this guy than I was. I thought. Because you're like, I could see him going ahead of Henry Ruggs if Ruggs slipped or being the third receiver taken maybe. And you convinced me. Barton's like, I think that Justin Jefferson belongs in sort of a 1B tier, right? As opposed to all the 2 guys with the Ayuks and the Denzel Mims and whoever else you want to throw in there, Jalen Reagors and Chenaults. I'm a little shocked he's not on your list here. I'm rolling the dice maybe, and clearly he's the guy who could bite me in the ass the biggest, I think, because he's the only guy who I have who you don't have. But man, so wagering wise, I have under 5.5 receivers, right? Taken in the first round at a pretty nice plus number. So there's a good chance I lose that, but it's a number that I'm willing to roll the dice on. But there's no way in hell that I'd play under 5. I think that we absolutely get at least 4 receivers in the first round, and probably 5. I don't know if we'll get to 6. I think Jefferson's going to be one of those 5 pretty clearly. Somebody's got to fall in love with him, right? Maybe I'm wrong on this.
Go right into my trap, bud. Caught you.
Shit.
I'm joking. Like because remember, I mean, this is what we think or are confident is going to happen. So yes, that is the way I view Justin Jefferson, and I think if I'm gambling on whether or not he gets drafted in the first round, I expect he will. But if we're looking at sort of where I have some uncertainty there, like I could see. All right, so I think the first three are going to go. Now there is, like I said, I can see someone having Justin Jefferson above maybe Ruggs, dependent eye of the beholder. But assuming those first 3 go first, then my fear of having Justin Jefferson on there was, all right, what if the next team that wants a receiver is just looking for a big body? Like they're just going to go after either T. Higgins or Denzel Mims or
Pittman
Michael
even.
Pittman. Yeah. Or it's just, what if that's the direction they go? And then, what if someone just has just fallen in love with Brandon Ayuk and his toughness, and it's that he's just going to be the next receiver off the board. So it was less about me not having confidence in Jefferson, more about me being a little bit nervous about the competition for that next wide receiver spot. So look, I think you will probably get that right, but I just think there's a chance that you won't, in which case that's a big win for me.
If you miss one, you're done.
And look, so this is probably, I would say this is about where my list ended in terms of the ones we've discussed that I was confident in. Like I said, I had just a minor hesitation with kind of a similar reasoning with Andrew Thomas. But other than that, everyone we discussed was pretty much my locks. But then now is my next group is my, like, you got to shoot to score group, the miss 100% of the shots you don't take group. And I didn't know what your number was going to be at. I didn't want to leave the putt short. I had to just, dial in for a couple of these other guys. And so I have 2 more than you and 3 different guys than you, with Jefferson not being on my list. So mine are Patrick Queen, Caleb Von Chasen, and honestly, maybe the one I'm least confident in is Jordan Love. Where are you on those 3 guys? How close were you?
So I was actually really pretty close on all 3.
Is there any buyer's remorse right now? Do you look at the list and are you jealous that I put any of those guys on, or are you?
Yeah, because you had 2 more guys than I did. Like I
but
like
I have 2 more opportunities. I have 2 more opportunities to get it wrong, though.
That's true. That's certainly true. So with me, I basically thought about it and I said, okay, everybody that I take here, I want to be confident they go in the top 20. Right? Like if I'm thinking in my head, this is probably a guy in that, like, if I think he goes 25th, then reasonably he could probably go anywhere from, like, I don't know, 14 to 34. If we think about it. And if you go 34, you're out of the first round. There's only 32 picks. So all the guys I picked, I'm really pretty confident are going to go in the top 20. Now I may be a total dummy on this. We come back next week and be like, wow, we only got 13 of these right, even though our list seems kind of short. And that's possible. With Patrick Queen, my worry is that I don't know. He only started for 1 year at LSU, right? So there's a little bit of track record stuff there. Some teams might like Murray over him, but if I had to just say yes or no, will the guy go first round? Yes, Patrick Queen I think is going to be a first rounder. With Jordan Love, yes, I think he's going to be a first rounder. But I also thought Drew Lock was probably going to be a first rounder and be pushed up because of the whole quarterback scarcity stuff in the league. And Drew Lock went, I think, in the 40s last year to whomever took him. Denver, I think it is. And then with Chase on, there's a lot of like second tier pass rushers this year to where there's clearly some A1 pass rusher types. And I think he has the ability to be like just as good as a Chase Young, perhaps. But I don't know that he stands out enough for me among the second tier guys to where I wasn't comfortable locking him up, But these are three guys who were right on my list. The other two that I had to cut because I had your three. AJ Terrell from Clemson, who I think is pretty good shot of being the number 3 corner taken in the draft. And then because Daniel Jeremiah of the NFL Network tweeted it, he said Austin Jackson's going to go a lot higher than people think. And he thinks Austin Jackson could go in the top 15. Wow. So those were sort of the guys who I was like, all right. And then, McKinney, not confident enough. Murray, not confident enough. Gross Matos, definitely not confident enough. I mean, I think he's probably a very late first. Ruiz, not confident enough. But your 3 and then those other 2 were kind of the 5 that I had to cut because I did have 5 more. Then I was like, this is too many. I got to cut this down.
Yeah, Chasen is he was one of these that I like him too much. Like I think he's too good to leave him off. Like I could see teams passing on him, but I just it's hard for me to leave a guy like that who I think is so good on there. And Patrick Queen just seems like this modern hot commodity at the linebacker position that everyone's falling in love with right now. Though you're right in the sense Kenneth Murray has some similarities. Jordan Love, look, if he doesn't get picked, someone else will. So if Jordan Love gets out of the second round or out of the first round, that means that Fromm or Eason or Hurts or someone got picked up there at 1, and I like my chances with Love over the field there. I will say, on the flip side, like it seems like every mock I see has Yetur Gross-Matos in there, and I don't see Yetur Gross-Matos as a first round pick. I could be. I mean, obviously I could be wrong. I haven't dug into the film as much as the draft nicks, I guess, but I was tempted to. But most places, like to your point, Bud, there I see him. He's like in the 25 to 32 range. So I'm not gonna roll that dice. And I have similar thoughts on AJ Terrell, with Jamar Chase just totally taking his lunch money in the national championship game. Like I can't, just on principle, I can't be like betting money on him being a first round draft pick. Someone could take him, and he's a good player, but Jamar Chase is drinking his milk right now, and that's still pretty prevalent in my mind.
Did you ever think about taking Austin Jackson or Caesar?
No, because that's like Caesar seems too much like who's like how many teams are thinking about taking Caesar Ruiz right now?
Right, probably not many.
I don't know, maybe like there's 6 or something. Like I just don't like those odds. Austin, I hope he gets drafted first round. I had him as a 5-star. We were higher than most. I love the dude, but this sort of stock rising stuff is basically the extent of my confidence in Austin Jackson getting drafted first round. I think if you turn on the tape, like it's not obvious that he's a first rounder. And I even wrote about him in my story today for 24/7. I wrote about sort of some value picks based on where their perceived value is at now. Like some guys that you could potentially get in good spots that are good players relative to where people perceive them. And I had Austin Jackson as one of those guys because he's only 20 years old. He's an elite athlete who's maturing. He's a high character human being, like all these elements that make you think he's a really, really good player. Basketball player, shot putter in high school, like all that stuff that we love to see. But ultimately, there's, if we're putting our money on first round guys, you want to see the production, and Austin Jackson feels like he's still warming up from a on-field standpoint.
So we're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, I actually dug up some numbers on the top mock draft last year and how many first-round picks they actually got right. Again, this is a mock draft that was scored out of more than 40 mock drafts out there, so stick with us, and when we come back, we will discuss how we think our picks might line up against that. All right, dude, we're back. So I've got this list here, and I went to fantasypros.com, and they evaluate the mock drafts, right? And they basically score it on a bunch of different categories, but the most important category is accuracy. And you get some bonus points if you nail the player to the exact right team. But they mainly want to say, like, how many spots were you off? So, if you said a guy was going to go 5th overall and he went 12th, you're 7 spots off. That's not that bad on average. So Charlie Campbell of WalterFootball.com had the top mock draft, and he had 24 out of his 32 picks right. That is the best mock draft out there, 24 out of 32. That means he still had 8 guys he thought were going to go in the first round wrong. Like that shows how tough this is to do. So here are the ones who he had in who did not go in the first round.
And hey, so by the way, like this, so the best mock draft days before the NFL draft.
Yeah, it was literally, I think, day of
the NFL draft, had 24 of the 32 potential first-round picks. We pick 32 5-stars a year, so stop giving us hell when a 5-star doesn't go number 1, and stop telling us that we're not allowed to celebrate when a 5-star does go first round. This stuff is hard, and I think when you're only hitting what is that, 75%?
Yeah.
If you're only hitting 75% day of the draft, then we're doing pretty good 5 years out.
Your mailman was probably a 2-star. All right, so he had an FCS corner who he thought was going to go 20th. The guy ended up going I think 33rd. He had somebody named, I can't read my own handwriting here, going 22nd. The guy went 44th, so there's a miss of 22 picks there. He had Ford going 23. The guy went 38th. He had Taylor going 28th. He went 35. He had Adderley going 29th. The guy went 60th. He had Juan Thornhill going 30th. The dude went 63rd. He had McCoy, the A&M center, going 31st, and he ended up 48th. And he had Paris Campbell going 32nd, and he went 59th. Now, on the flip side, here's the dudes he missed, and he actually did a 7-round mock draft. So this guy is a guy who's pretty into mock drafting, right? He had N'Keal Harry going 33rd, and he went 32nd. So pretty damn good there. Yeah. He had Caleb McGarry, the Washington tackle, going 76th, and he went 31st. So I don't think Barton and I even thought about ranking 76 guys for a potential exercise here at all. He had some other dude, DeAndre Baker, going 49th. He ended up going 30th to the Giants. He had Collier going 58th, and he ends up 29th. So, I mean, missing by 29 spots there. Again, this is the best mock draft out there. He had Jerry Tillery, 45th. The dude went 28th. He had Titus Howard, 82nd, and Titus Howard went 23rd. He had Savale, 43rd. The guy went 21st. And check this. He did not have the guy who went 14th overall in his first round. I mean, that like we think, okay, top 14 picks, we're going to nail all of these. And this is the best mock draft out there. Lindstrom, the Boston College offensive lineman, he had him 44th. He gets pushed up to 14th. This is a day of draft, mock draft. The best one out there. So this stuff is hard. Like really hard. I threw this out on Twitter. How many players do you think you would need to list if you were trying to come up with a list of everybody who had even a chance going in the first round? Like if I said, Barton, you get 60 picks. You think you can nail all 32? I don't know that I could after seeing that.
I don't know. I mean, it's such a guess. And I think that's the way it should be. Like we shouldn't be able to predict the 32 picks because otherwise it's just groupthink. Otherwise it's just everyone has convinced each other that these are because I mean history's shown us that the first 32 players drafted aren't always the best players in the league. And so, I mean, if you're a decent GM, like, you should be willing to take some risks. And it's why, and I think it's something that we've tried to incorporate into our rankings process of 24/7 Sports too, is the idea that, look, occasionally, like last year we had Peter Skoronski, a 5-star. He's an offensive lineman who signed with Northwestern. No one else has him anywhere close to that. And frankly, we had him a 5-star or close to it for most of the process. And I think that his presence there, us inviting him to the All-American Bowl, is the only reason that he was even like ranked anywhere close to us by other sites. And that's not me pounding my chest. That's just the sort of we put him more into other people's consciousness. Us having him as a 5-star made other people put them a little bit to the test and saying, look, that you're taking a stand now if you're going to say he's not at least a 4-star guy. And so there's a little bit of that in the industry as well. And so I think taking stands like that help our rankings process and in a way help the entire industry, because part of the reason that we're seeing this is going to be probably the best draft maybe ever in terms of the recruiting rankings and how we did and getting highly rated guys, projecting them to get drafted high. I think part of that is those guys get bubbled up by us, get found, or not found, but taken as signees and commits by big name programs. And they, if we saw Chad Lindstrom early enough in the process and made him a top 100 kid and believed in him, either he's either going to have a bunch of other offers that other sites are then going to sort of latch onto, or he's going to have make it tougher on Boston College to keep him. He's just not going to be an under the radar guy that then everyone's surprised at when he's good. And so an element of that is just sort of baked into our process right now, to where, hey, some guys may end up as high profile players that are only high profile players at the end of the process because we were willing to make a stand on them early in the process. That's a little bit of a tangent. Sorry, I get on these
good though.
These rankings rolls sometimes, but it's fun to talk through them.
You're not passionate about the rankings, right? Like that's not a pet project of yours that you obsess about.
Yeah, no. It's a little something I do on the side.
All right, so you wrote about the undervalued 5-stars. We chatted about it a little bit. You want to talk about that anymore, or you want to jump into maybe the piece you have coming out for CBS?
Yeah, I can talk about the CBS piece. So I was asked by CBS to basically do the whole, basically who did the industry miss on that are about to be first-round draft picks, which is asked every year, and in most cases it's 2 stars, it's unranked guys. And I think later on this week, Bud, you're probably going to hit on a few of those guys. But the beauty of this cycle is none, if any, like maybe just a couple at best, are going to be first-round candidates. So that's sort of a win for the industry. But there are still some 3 stars. And so I kind of dug into how we might have missed on some of these 3-star prospects. Some were excusable misses, some were inexcusable. I'll go through a couple of the highlights here. Like Mekhi Becton, first of all, high 3-star kid. It's a miss, but it's important to remember there are degrees of 3-star. This kid was a sort of a top 400-ish player that was on the cusp of 4-star status. So we believed in him. You got to draw the line somewhere. That was generally a miss. Josh Jones went to Houston, but was graded out as a mid 3-star guy, a Power 5 level prospect. Viewed as a high upside guy. Kid just happened to hit his upside.
And he went to Houston, and we still had him rated highly. So for everybody's like, oh, hey, if the kid goes to a G5 school, they won't rate him highly. No, that's not true. We would be morons to ignore the data that we get, which is college offers, right? Like, right. If Nick Saban offers a kid, we're not going to make him a 5-star for that reason. But if you don't take a pretty close look at a guy who all of a sudden, a defensive back who just got Kirby and Nick offers in the Southeast out of nowhere, you're not doing your job.
Right, and it's important to sort of articulate too that it's not just the offer, that then the check mark on their profile, but it's us digging and understanding where he is on their board and how they view him, and then making sure that we understand how that factors to our evaluation. Not that it factors into our evaluation, but it might lead us to make sure we double down on that film and feel confident where we have him.
That's something we did a lot in the last rankings meeting. In fact, we said, hey, like I talked to this school and they told me that they like him, but he is a camp offer kid. So if he wants to try to commit to them right now, they would not accept the commitment. And that's important to know, like you said, because some of these schools that offer 400 kids, they really can't accept all 400 players. There's a math issue there. So it is important to kind of understand, a consensus being built around a player based on inputs from multiple schools.
So the last few here I think are all interesting case studies. Justin Herbert was a high 3-star kid whose only offers were Oregon, Montana State, Northern Arizona, and Portland State. He's from Eugene, didn't get an Oregon offer until his senior season, and was given a high 3-star grade. No one ever saw him at a camp. He didn't get out on the circuits. Didn't have a college feedback from anyone else. And I'm not even sure Oregon offered him with the expectation that he was a future NFL guy, but clearly they gained confidence in him as a kid in their backyard. They went on him and offered him. Could we have rolled the dice, thrown a 4-star grade on Justin Herbert based on highlight film? I guess, yeah, we could have. Could we have flown someone out to Eugene and taken in a game for the kid that Oregon offered in mid-October? Yeah, I guess we could have done that too and factor that into our evaluation. But neither of those things happened. He was a high 3-star kid that we felt like looked like had talent based on highlight film, but just there wasn't a whole lot else to go on. And so he turned out he was a really good player, was developed, and hit a really high ceiling. So, hey, that's one we would have liked to have gotten, but I'm not necessarily embarrassed about the way that played out for the rankings industry.
By the way, speaking of Becton, Ivans and I think we may have found a kid who is sort of Becton looking and doesn't have a lot of big offers yet. So tomorrow's rankings meeting,
sweet.
Get excited. I
like that.
Yeah, exactly. I usually write an article about the 2-stars and unrated players who go in the first round. And there are usually a couple, right? And it's something I've done for a number of years now. And it's something I track because to me, I don't consider a 3-star going in the first round as that big of a miss for the recruiting industry. And that's a standard that I made up before I was in the rankings part of the recruiting industry. If you look at the numbers, you look at the total number of high school football players out there, you look at the total number of players who are going to sign to play scholarship football, so whether that's FBS or scholarship FCS, they get fewer scholarships, but it is still getting paid to do it. 3 stars to me, and not to me, but just mathematically, they still represent a very small number of the total kids who are going to go play scholarship football at some level. The majority of them are going to be still 2-star and unrated prospects, and it doesn't mean that we never looked at them. It just means like they didn't do anything stand out enough to warrant, for the most part, getting a rating. And I usually have these buckets that I put kids in as to why they were either a 2-star or an unrated player, because I do consider that just on its face like a miss for the recruiting industry. If this kid goes first round and we had him as an unrated or 2-star, that I really want to know why. A 3-star, that doesn't bother me as much as it might bother Barton if it does. So I have all these different buckets, and one is player gained like 20% of his body weight in college, but kept the same level of athleticism. I mean, that's something we see. I think we discussed last episode, like with Zach Bond, who was a 3-star, but he went from like 200 to 235-ish in college and kept the same level of athleticism. And he was a quarterback in high school. So that's another one. Did you have a significant position change? And I don't mean just going safety to linebacker, but like if you went like safety to defensive end, that's a pretty big one that us as recruiting industry people, like if I went into tomorrow's recruiting ranking meeting and I said, hey, Barton, I'm going to project this kid to add 60 pounds and go from a safety to a strong side defensive end, he'd probably like, hey, we're going to remove Bud from the Zoom call going forward because this is just nonsense. But this happens occasionally. And so I'm okay if as a recruiting industry we miss on a kid because he went Titus Howard on us and he put on 70 pounds, which is what Titus Howard did, going from quarterback to offensive tackle. This year, though, I've looked at this, the list of kids who I think are locks and the list of kids who I think are players, not kids anymore, who I think have a legitimate chance to go round one. The only guy I really see who was an unrated player was Brandon Ayuk. And that was purely a grades thing. Nobody offered him because they knew he was going to have to go junior college, at least from what I've been able to read. I don't really remember him as a recruit out of high school. And we had a good grade on him coming out of JUCO.
So another one that's in that vein, we catch a lot of heat for Justin Jefferson's ranking. I think he was a 2-star in the composite. He was actually a 3-star by us at 24/7. But Justin Jefferson was assumed to be going JUCO, so much so that he didn't commit to LSU until August of preseason camp the year he was enrolling. So he committed and enrolled because he finally got qualified. And so LSU made him the last
3-star composite.
He was 3-star composite. Okay, so he made 3-star composite, but either way, it was a perfect example of him just not being evaluated because there was an assumption there he wasn't going to be an FBS recruit. And so we would just then evaluate him as a junior college recruit when the time came. Again, right as spring camp, preseason camp was getting going, LSU managed to get him eligible or get him qualified, and he enrolls. And so we're stuck there with a 3-star grade on a guy that's a really good player. So, that's an example of one, like we started to address that in a way and just making sure, look, if a kid's good, we think he's going JUCO, rank him like we think he is. Don't put him in the 247, but get a 4-star grade on him if we believe he's that level of player, because you never know what kind of miracles are going to happen. So, Justin Jefferson, I can live with that on our end from an evaluation standpoint. Like I said, I think Justin Herbert, I can live with that from an evaluation standpoint. There's only so much we could do. Jordan Love is an example of, like, if you saw Jordan Love in high school and said that guy's going to be a first-round draft pick, then you, sir, are a wizard or a genie or something that has supernatural powers. Because, look, talk to Greg Biggins and Brandon Huffman and those guys that see everybody out west. They remember seeing Jordan Love multiple times and him just not being very good. Now, that's not to say you can't be a coach and see Jordan Love and be like, man, that kid's got some tools. And if we develop him and get some weight on him and clean things up a little bit, this kid could be pretty special. But I think that same person would also acknowledge, like, this guy might get on campus and never do anything. Jordan Love went the former way. Like, that's credit to Matt Wells at Utah State and those guys and getting him developed. So again, that's another one that I can live with. The two that I can't live with that are potential first-round draft picks.
Yeah, who bothers you? I want to know this.
The two that I can't live with are, and there's really only two, because Jonathan Taylor could go one, but we actually had him as a 4-star on 24/7 Sports. He was a composite 3. I've addressed the other guys. I mean, Mekhi Beckman, yes, like I would have liked to have had him as a 4. So I'd throw him in this mix too. There's probably 3 potential first-rounders, at least that I'd sort of analyzed that might keep me up at night a little bit. One's Kenneth Murray. So Becton. The other one's Kenneth Murray, who had offers. He had testing numbers that suggested he was a really good athlete. He had good film. He had production as a player. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why we had him as a 3-star, because other people had him as a 4. So that's one that's just a pure miss by us. It happens. Like, sometimes we're going to miss on somebody. Kenneth Murray, for whatever reason, we didn't get a good eval on Kenneth Murray. The other one, and you mentioned him, Bud, is Zach Bond. Because Zach Bond, yes, he underwent a physical transformation of gaining 30-plus pounds. He was a high school quarterback that transitioned to linebacker. Like, that's a little bit hard to predict is going to happen. That said, I think we are equipped right now in the way we view players as prospects to get Zach Bond right. And I hope we will in the future, because he played quarterback, but he's also like one of the most productive players in the state of Wisconsin. He was a 21.5 200-meter guy at, I don't know what he was weighing, probably 200-plus pounds.
201, yeah.
So multiple sport athletes, fantastic track numbers, elite as an athlete playing quarterback. I would hope that if that guy pops up to us this cycle again in different clothing, in different pads, in different uniform, in a different state, we'll sniff that out and maybe not make him a 5-star, because that's a bridge too far probably to make that sort of a projection, but at least throw a 4-star grade on him so that on draft day we can pound our chest and say we knew that there was something there.
And I want to ask you this. So I've read some profiles of Zach Bond, and we're going to wrap it up after this because we're already basically at an hour. Did Wisconsin recruit him as a QB? Because I think if we had word from our Wisconsin people that, hey, they project this kid to switch to defense and to play linebacker, then we're going to look at him as a slightly different way, right? Like that allows us to focus in even more. If we're getting word that Wisconsin is recruiting this kid as a QB, then our basically not prediction, but our assumption is that he's not going to be lifting weights quite like a linebacker would, right? He may not bulk up and train to play like an impact defensive position. So I'm curious. I don't remember his recruitment, and I'm not going to just make it up here on the fly.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, because Alan True, who is our Midwest guru, does remember his recruitment, and I was talking to him a little bit about it this week, or he was reminiscing on Zach Bond's recruitment, and so this is the only thing that I will allow us to sort of only excuse that I will allow for us is that Wisconsin was even a little bit late on actually making a move for him. In fact, it sounds like they wanted him as a preferred walk-on initially, maybe a gray shirt, and eventually they took him in their class as an athlete. He was, because as a quarterback, I say he was productive. It was a dual threat productivity,
right.
Like he was an athlete at quarterback. And I think that was clear. But it's a little bit hard for us to be able to identify every good player in every remote state that has only FCS offers, because aside from that Wisconsin offer, I think Zach Bond's only other offer was North Dakota State. So yes, like theoretically, we could have found him even with a North Dakota State offer. And someday we're going to have a North Dakota State or a South Dakota State or a North Dakota kid that's a 4-star. I'm determined to find one, because those guys produce NFL players too. But had we ranked Zach Bond a 4-star prior to his commitment to Wisconsin, that would have been pretty unprecedented. We would have been ranking a kid with one FCS offer that we knew of as a future NFL player. It happens. I hope we have the conviction and the expertise to identify that guy at some point, but that is not an easy ask.
The common element there between both Bond and Herbert were that nobody recognized them essentially until their senior years, and the only school that did was the school in whose backyard the player played. Right,
and that's a tough bridge to gap as well, because. And even when you're talking about, like when I talk to college coaches, and I'll be like, I might even send them a kid and be like, hey, this kid's really good out of Ohio. And they're like, well, why hadn't Ohio State offered him?
Yep.
Like, man, I don't know. If Ohio State offers it, they're going to get him. So, like, why do you care? But
the right question there is, why didn't Kentucky offer him?
Right. So, like, but that is something that coaches look at. Like, if a kid's sitting there and the profile for that kid on their desk says middle of Wisconsin, North Dakota State offer, the coach is either going to say, why hasn't Wisconsin offered him? Or he's going to say, man, I don't know. Like, is it worth my time to even recruit this kid? Because if I offer him, all Wisconsin has to do is offer him, and then he's going to, I got no chance. And so that is the type of issue that we have to navigate, not in making an evaluation, but in finding these guys and getting them to our, like, bubbled into our consciousness so that they actually are put in front of us, and because ultimately, look, our job is to evaluate and grade the players that are being recruited. Like, our job is not a scouting service in the sense that it's a discovery process. There's an element of that, but that is not our goal, to discover a bunch of new no-name guys. Our goal is to cover, from a media perspective, the top recruits in college football and identify who those guys are.
Well said. This is the Barton and Bud Show. We just passed 155-star reviews on iTunes. Let's go ahead and get us up to 247 quickly. If we do, I think we will do a special listener-only mailbag edition, maybe, of the show to kind of celebrate that milestone coming up. Please rate and review us on iTunes. Subscribe to us, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, whatever you want to use there. Or not iTunes. I'm supposed to say Apple Podcasts now. So please use Apple Podcasts. I'm a Droid guy, so, whatever. Anyway, 5 stars.
That green bubble on our text messages,
yeah.
Bud, is driving me crazy, man.
my wife wants me to get an iPhone, so I might do that probably pretty soon.
Do it.
All right, hey, hit us with those 5-star reviews. We'll be back to talk to y'all next week.